Madam Speaker, I rise today to speak in support of the rule and the underlying legislation. Included within the measure is H.R. 467, the HALT Fentanyl Act. It is important to say that the HALT Fentanyl Act makes great strides in addressing the growing fentanyl crisis in our country by making permanent the scheduling of fentanyl-related analogs in the Schedule I category, in addition to giving researchers the ability to conduct studies on these substances. We can begin to repair the damage that this drug has inflicted on our communities and our nation. I spent almost 3 decades practicing as a physician. I've witnessed and heard so many devastating stories of the consequences of this crisis which we now face. We face it in North Texas, and we face it across the country. Between September and March, nearly a dozen teens spread across 3 schools in Carrollton, Texas, were injured because of fentanyl poisoning. In fact, 3 of those poisonings were fatal. 1 death is too many, and we must equip our communities to address this issue from the source. The Committee on Energy and Commerce has a long history of producing bipartisan policies to actually address the opiate crisis in this country. The Support for Patients and Communities Act, known as the Support Act of 2018, was a product of our committee, and it made reforms to the way we administer programs to control and respond to and better treat individuals who have a problem with opiates. However, the landscape has drastically changed. It is now a different disease than what it was in 2018. So we've gone from diversion of prescription opiates to the manufacture and importation of illicit fentanyl, products that are created in the People's Republic of China in their base form, exported to Mexico, imported by cartels, and poisoning our children. We need to better understand the effects of fentanyl and fentanyl-related substances to better treat patients suffering from exposure. The HALT Fentanyl Act will improve regulations to encourage research so we can better understand the impacts of fentanyl on human health. Our recent bipartisan mental health package passed in the Energy and Commerce Committee worked on several provisions that would relax regulations to expand access to evidence-based treatment programs and ease restrictions on treatment options for substance use care. Finally, the HALT Fentanyl Act will ensure that law enforcement officers have the tools to prosecute cases relating to fentanyl and fentanyl-related substances. Due to the crisis at our southern border, illicit fentanyl remains an imminent threat throughout the country. At a time when people are dying at alarming rates from fentanyl poisoning, this legislation is an absolute necessity to counteract this crisis and save our young American lives. Madam Speaker, also included in this package is a provision that would repeal a continuation of President Biden's war on affordable energy and consumer choice. S.J. Res 11 will be instrumental in protecting American families who would suffer from additional cost passed along to them and ensure that they, the American public, are able to select vehicles that best fit their needs rather than functionaries in the administration in a far-removed Washington, D.C. If not for our Republican majority, Madam Speaker, President Biden could continue to act unilaterally to enact his radical new Green New Deal agenda. Thankfully, the American public saw fit to entrust Republicans with the majority in the People's House to prevent President Biden and Democrats from acting upon their worst impulses. Once again, Democrats have seen fit to attack a vital component of our nation's economy. Why Democrats would want to make the lives of those who deliver our food and our goods to our grocery store and our homes, the fuel to our gas stations, I do not know. Madam Speaker, what I do know is that every American owes these hard-working men and women a tremendous debt of gratitude that we will not soon be able to repay. Madam Speaker, in 2021, trucks moved close to 11 billion tons of freight across America. That's over 70% of the cargo shipped in the continental United States. During the COVID-19 pandemic, while some were sitting in the comfort of their homes, while dozens of Amazon packages were dropped at their doorsteps, it was only because of these long-haul drivers who traverse our nation daily, ensuring our communities are supplied with goods that allow Americans to enjoy a high standard of living and literally prevent American families from starving during the pandemic. So it is bewildering, Madam Speaker, that Democrats have decided to reward the courage and the perseverance of long-haul truckers with onerous and expensive new regulations that will have a devastating effect upon their livelihoods. Madam Speaker, implementing these new regulations and standards will burden truck drivers with as much as $8,000 in new costs when it comes time to retire their current vehicles. $8,000 per driver when it's time to retire their current vehicle. Now, Democrats pride themselves on being advocates of the little guy and the downtrodden, but I would ask you, Madam Speaker, how is forcing Americans already suffering from the sky-high inflation brought to us by the Biden administration, saddling them with an additional $8,000 taken from them, $8,000 of their hard-earned dollars? How is it lightening their burden? Madam Speaker, simply, it does not. Once again, President Biden and members of the Democratic Party are so single-minded in their pursuit of this Green New Deal agenda that they are blind to the obvious collateral damage that their policies are inflicting. Thankfully, our Republican majority will be able to deliver tangible relief by repealing this counterproductive and misguided executive action. Madam Speaker, today we are also considering H.J. Res. 45 to formally disapprove of the authority the administration claims it has to unilaterally forgive student loans. In August of 2022, the Biden administration announced a plan to cancel student debt up to $20,000 for Pell Grant recipients and up to $10,000 for non-Pell Grant recipients for those making under $125,000 a year. Madam Speaker, on May 11th of 2023, 2 weeks ago, a glorious day, the public health emergency came to an end. Americans are back to work. They're back to school. They're returning to normal life. But the Biden administration is attempting to claim authority for this $315 billion student loan forgiveness through the COVID-19 national emergency status. It also claims under the Higher Education Relief Opportunities for Students, the so-called HEROES Act of 2003, and this 2003 law provided temporary relief to military members during their deployment following 9/11. This is a twisted interpretation of a bill that compensated our nation's servicemen and women for their heroic efforts after the nation was attacked on 9/11. The bottom line is this is quite likely unconstitutional. It's an overreach of executive authority and would not make student debt disappear. It would, however, unfairly shift the burden of student loans to the 87% of Americans who did not take out such loans. Madam Speaker, these are important. This is an important bill to consider these, important rule to consider these important bills. I will reserve the balance of my time.